Hello! Welcome back to Fast Politics. I'm Christopher McFarland, your host. It is so nice to be back. You know, I've been traveling the world, Barcelona, Mykonos, you name it. I've been there the past couple of weeks. I hope you're inspired by the glowing tan that I'm sporting tonight. It won't last, but I'm happy to have it tonight. Tonight we have a very exciting episode for you. We're doing something technically savvy that we've actually never done on the show. We actually have a Skype interview with a spectacular clinical psychologist on the show. Later, we'll also be enjoying some time with our favorite Danielle Flanagan, correspondent on the show. As usual, we will begin tonight's episode with a musical rant, but I also just kind of want to set up what tonight's theme is all about. Before I do that, I should also say, please like us on Twitter at @fast_politics and follow us on Facebook. So the theme tonight, if I had to title tonight's episode, would be false equivalency. False equivalency. What is that, you might ask? No, it's not. It's not Ann Coulter. It's the idea that you, for example, let's say that you had a picture of Jesus and you had a picture of, I don't know, Adolf Hitler. They both have mustaches. And some people would say that makes them the same, but the reality is it doesn't. They are not the same thing. So tonight we're going to be exploring a few interesting things. One thing that I'm really excited about in terms of common ground, Republican Congress is actually supporting Obama in his push toward criminal justice reform, cutting the sentencing of nonviolent drug sentences this week. Barack Obama cut the sentences over 100 inmates and got absolutely no Republican opposition. We've almost never seen that in the 8 years that he's been in the Oval Office. So I want to praise the Republicans for identifying that there is definitely an issue there. I also want to celebrate that Donald Trump flip-flopped on the number one issue to Ann Coulter. That's Ann Coulter. We love Ann, don't we? Just kidding. Kicking the 11 million Mexican immigrants out of the country. He literally said his positioning was softening, and basically the same thing he attacked every other GOP candidate on is now his policy. Or at least it was for about 5 minutes. He's flip-flopped so much on it that Reince Priebus, the chair of the Republican National Committee, was asked over the weekend on Meet the Press to set the record straight, and he actually had no idea what his candidate's policy was. That's awesome. And his timing was amazing. He flip-flopped. He did this on the first day of Ann Coulter's book tour. I mean, honestly, if I was writing this, if I was a Democratic strategist trying to create the most problems for the GOP, that's exactly what I would have done. It's spectacular. It does make you feel like he's working for us, but the reality is it's just incompetence. He has a lifetime history of that, 70 years, in fact. I also want to address Trump's failures. Par for the course. He's shafted, not paid, conned, duped just about everyone he's ever worked with. So his failing campaign is just par for his incompetency. Par for the course. He fails everything he does except reality TV. Sadly, I think the same electorate would actually nominate Kim Kardashian over Jeb Bush. Let's now sing a musical rant about it. Schadenfreude, sorry. Pleasure derived from another person's misfortune. That is what I'm actually experiencing about Ann Coulter right now. All right, now we're going to choir practice. If I could have my choir members join me. We will now begin the musical rant portion of tonight's episode. Ready? And...
Oops, Donald did it again.
He made you believe his immigration policies.
Oh, baby,
It might seem like a flip-flop, but it doesn't mean that he's serious. 'Cause he'll say what you wanna hear. That is just so typically him.
Oh, baby, oops, Donald did it again.
He played with your heart. He's not your best friend.
Oh, baby.
Oops, you think he's in love. So does Melania, and he's not Republican. But to lose all of the polling, that's a great sign of things to come.
Oh, baby.
Thanks, Don, for giving away the presidency to someone named Hillary.
Oh,
Oh,
baby.
baby, oops, Donald did it again.
Again. You know, this truly challenges my journalistic gravitas.
Thus concludes the musical rant portion of tonight's episode. God, I love that. You know, I know that there are people out there who were tuning in just for that, so thank you. Thank you for your support and encouragement. Okay, let's jump right into the fast sheet. This is the portion of the episode where we talk about the top news items. Now, because I've been off the air for a few weeks, there were so many things to choose from. Honestly, so much has happened on both the right and the left side of the aisle, I didn't quite know what to pick. But these are the things that I've identified as the most relevant, salient things for us to discuss right now. But there's that example of false equivalence I talked about earlier. Okay, so, oh my God. Tony. Where is Tony? I asked for a graphic of Kaepernick, and this is the one he chose. But look, we are in West Hollywood, so if you're going to get a graphic, that's what you should expect. He's the quarterback for the 49ers, who silently protested all of the violence against the black community in the recent past, the higher than white rates of incarceration versus whites, and generally not feeling like his community is being treated equally, essentially saying America's not great for everyone. Ironically, that is exactly what Donald Trump has been saying for 15 months, and the same people that hate Kaepernick love Trump. I can't imagine what the difference between them might be. I just don't know. What could be the difference between those two folks? I'm not sure. All right, also on the fast sheet, Hillary Clinton's husband, Bill Clinton, you may remember him, former president of the United States, started the Clinton Foundation, as most presidents do when they leave office, taking up a social issue. And the Clinton Foundation now treats 11.5 million folks living with HIV by providing medication. Basically, they're treating 1 in 4 people globally living with HIV. And the GOP is asserting that rich, powerful folks may have made contributions to this foundation in order to get a meeting with Hillary. But these are already rich people that would have been meeting with Hillary, and there's no evidence that she literally did a single thing for any of these people. Now, I think it's a good idea for her to pass leadership of the organization, away from her if she becomes elected, but not because I think there's actually anything untoward about anything she's done. I'm only in favor of that move as it puts her beyond reproach. Maine Governor Paul LePage. There's a Clinton Foundation. This is Governor Paul LePage of Maine. This guy, oh my God. This GOP wackadoodle, he is the governor of a state. And if you think that governors can't be wackadoodles, just try to remember, if you can, Sarah Palin. This guy just went nuts in the most racist, bigoted way, laced with heavy threats of violence, referencing his desire to put a bullet between the Democrats' eyes. And somehow that is not standing out as the most racist behavior, because Donald Trump and his alt-right movement have gotten all the focus. That literally blows me. A governor threatening the death of a Democratic legislator, I just feel like, I don't know, up until about 10 months ago, that would have not just been national, that would have been international headlines. And now it's just kind of it's an asterisk in the news. That just kind of highlights where we've come and how desensitized we're becoming during this election cycle. All right, speaking of racists, let's talk about the alt-right. What is the alt-right, you might ask? Good question. They are a collection of all the white supremacists who keep trying to brand themselves and rebrand themselves in a non-racist sounding way. They've been routinely rejected by prior GOP leadership, but now they're inching perilously close to having a leadership role in the campaign of Donald Trump, as Donald Trump hired Steve Bannon, former chief of Breitbart News, which has been an online haven for right-wing conspiracy ideology, particularly around the ideas of white supremacists and anti-immigration efforts. These are the things that I've identified that were the most salient and most relevant, and these are the things we're going to be talking about tonight on the show. There's a lot of other things, and I'm not trying to diminish any of the other things that have happened in the news over the past 3 or 4 weeks, but those are the things that I thought were most relevant for us. So, oh my God, Tony, we don't need a Pokemon in the show. God, I apologize, folks. I don't know how these things keep happening. Okay, so next we're going to, here's where we shift into the technical part of the show. Dr. Hillary Goldshire, IRACE, She's a clinical psychologist. She's been working in an esteemed practice here in Beverly Hills for the last 8 years. She is now going to join us on the show, and I'm going to attempt to bring her up. We'll see if we get her. Can you see her? Ah! Doctor, there you are. Do you see us? Do you see Fast Politics?
I see. Hello, Christopher.
Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I hope that you weren't put off by the musical beginning of the show. You may not have realized there was a musical number involved in the interview tonight.
I was surprised but entertained.
Good. Just so you all know, Dr. Iris has appeared on Fox News. She's appeared on CNN. She's discussed everything from the Boston bombing to folks on the red carpet during the Oscars. You are an esteemed, notable contributor on a variety of shows. So thank you so much for joining us. I want to jump right in. We've got limited time. We're only a half-hour show. So the first thing, before we get into the meat of what I really want to discuss, which is basically Donald Trump, I want to first talk about Dr. Harold Bornstein. His letter. I want to talk about how absurd and how filled with hyperbole it was. And then how he commented so negatively on Hillary's health, saying that he's familiar with her circumstances, but he's not her doctor. Besides being unethical, besides being a lie, besides being immoral, I just want to ask a very basic question, medical question. Is it legal? Is he allowed to actually do that? I've had so many friends that texted me saying, I think this guy may have just violated HIPAA or could be sued. What can you give us some insight on that?
Yeah, I mean, from a legal standpoint, as far as I know, there really isn't a violation because Hillary Clinton is not his patient. I mean, in
Wow.
theory, he can speculate about anyone, you, me, Hillary Clinton, without it violating sort of a legal standard. But an ethical or a moral standard is another question. And I think speculating, I mean, being a doctor myself, I am always really careful not to make comments publicly about people that aren't under my care. And so it's kind of a dangerous practice to do this, and certainly in such a public, critical topic and set of people, it's even more dangerous.
Wow. So he actually avoided a legal issue by not having her as his patient. That's
right. It would be decidedly against the law if he was treating Hillary Clinton or anybody and he publicly commented about their health unless they, for some reason, gave consent, which would not be the case in this scenario.
That's really amazing. That's amazing. And I would assume that he would have known that, which is why he felt freedom to speak once again in such a hyperbolic fashion, really and basically implying, that she's got some serious health problems. Conversely, of course, her doctor actually put out a letter that was not hyperbolic. It actually listed her medications. We know, for example, that she takes thyroid medication, but generally is in good health for a woman of 68 years old. And strangely, as a 70-year-old man, he has absolutely nothing going on. I mean, I've had grandparents, and by the time they were 65, they were taking something. So I just thought that whole thing was a little odd.
Listen, I think it's notable that there didn't appear to be any nuances in his report indicating that there was any part of Donald Trump's health that is compromised. It would be unusual for someone in their early 70s to not have something, and I'm not talking about a disease or a grave condition, but to have, some nuances to report in their health. So, look, because I do not treat Donald Trump, I also will not speculate, but it is notable and potentially unusual that there isn't anything to comment on in terms of his health at that age range.
Thank you. And I appreciate that you're not falling into the same pitfall that Dr. Trump's doctor fell into. So Thank you for being respectful, responsible. That's what we expect from you. So let me jump to what I really want to talk about. Sociopaths and psychopaths. First of all, is there a distinction, and is Donald one?
Sociopath and psychopath are terms that are really more layman terms in sort of my industry, so to speak. We don't really use those terms. The proper name and diagnosis for someone who we would regard or call a psychopath or a sociopath is antisocial personality disorder. And so, from kind of a layman's standpoint, psychopath and sociopath are sort of used interchangeably, just FYI, but it's not typically the verbiage we would use. Look, I mean, again, I don't know for sure because he's not under my care, but an antisocial personality diagnosis is pretty serious and is usually reserved for folks that engage in violent crimes and super nefarious, illegal, terrible behavior and have no regard for societal norms, no conscious.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that he'd fall under that category.
So he's probably
other symptoms or behaviors that he exhibits that would fall under other potential diagnosis or categories in psychology.
Okay, so he probably didn't like tie small animals to the train tracks as a kid. He probably didn't do that. He's a narcissist. So narcissist. Let me ask you about that. Everyone calls him a narcissist. I tend to believe that as a political leader or as any position, a neuroscientist, a neurosurgeon, somewhere where you've got the weight of the world kind of resting on your shoulders, I think a fair amount of narcissism is actually okay, and that doesn't worry me about him. But is there something more serious or more grave about his narcissism that we should be concerned about?
Well, look, I mean, I'll try to speak generally. I mean, there's a difference between having narcissistic qualities and having what we call narcissistic personality disorder. And narcissistic qualities, like you sort of alluded to, probably suit folks that are in a high-power position,
Mm-hmm.
That they think of themselves as highly capable and perhaps even superior, that they trust their own intuition and opinions, and are able to perform at high levels in highly stressful situations. So some narcissism, healthy narcissism in those kind of careers and positions might be a good thing. Narcissistic personality disorder is something different. It's sort of a pathological set of behaviors. Someone that has kind of an excessive need for admiration, someone that has a high sense of self-importance, and someone, frankly, that exhibits a lack of empathy. So, I mean, look, could
I actually think what you just described actually does fit Donald Trump. I'm not asking you to make a diagnosis, but me as a and he's not my patient, I'm not a doctor. To me, that actually, but I'll be honest with you, I'm actually less concerned that he might even have narcissistic personality disorder. I'm more concerned about, it's related to his narcissism though. It's the way he brings everything back to him, how he snaps at people on Twitter, how he doesn't seem to have a filter. What is that called? The way, the Twitter rants, the saying grossly inappropriate things. What is that? Is that a medical condition? Is it connected to narcissism? Or is that something different?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm kind of stating the obvious, but he clearly has a lack of impulse control. Is that an official diagnosis? No. Could it go along with narcissistic personality disorder? Yes. It could go along with other diagnoses as well. But that seems to be clear, and I feel fairly comfortable making that statement. I mean, it does seem that he acts out in these certain ways from an emotional place and then later either directly regrets it or puts something out that suggests he's trying to recant. So there does seem to be an impulse control issue at times.
Okay, so impulse control. For most people, a loss of impulse control doesn't carry with it or the weight behind it of the Oval Office. How nervous are you, or should we be, about the idea of Donald Trump and that impulse control being connected to the nuclear launch codes?
It's a question. I mean, look, it's hard to sit here literally in my place and make a comment about that specifically. But generally speaking, I mean, we don't want someone in that position with that much power and access to have a complete lack of impulse control. I don't know if it's a pathological set of behaviors that sort of follow him in every aspect of his life, or there's just certain scenarios that these behaviors are exhibited. I don't know, but okay. I think we'd be remiss not to think about that. That was the most gentle, neutral acknowledgement of the behavior without committing a diagnosis. So thank you for that very, very respectful approach to that.
I'm just going to ask you a couple more quick questions. I feel like the question I want to ask is racism contagious? But I know that question sounds crazy. But in light of like what's going on with Governor Paul LePage, for example, in Maine, in light of what's going on with the alt-right, suddenly, out of nowhere, it seems, being not just like 2% of the electorate, but like 25 to 30% of the electorate, are these ideas contagious? Are we witnessing something? Is there like a group psychosis happening within the alt-right, the GOP? Do you have an opinion? And I'm sorry, I didn't, normally for TV when you're meeting with doctors and lawyers, you'll prep them with questions. This is not one that I gave you in advance, so I apologize for that. But do you have any thoughts on that? And I hope I phrased that in a way that doesn't put you in an awkward diagnostic position.
Yeah, no, the phenomenon of groupthink is a well-studied one. The word contagious is probably an oversimplification, but the idea that people can feel more comfortable expressing less than acceptable ideas when they're in a group, and that there's some anonymity in it, that it can be sort of catching in that sense, and it is possible that people are getting sort of buoyed by the sense that they're part of something, and have a justification or an excuse to discuss or demonstrate, pretty disturbing ideas. So I find that worrisome.
And it is spread. You would,
about that.
from
quite worrisome.
From a clinical point of view, then you would also observe that it is spreading, at least in terms of what we're being exposed to via media.
It does appear that way, and it would follow along with some of the research I alluded to, that there is such a thing as a groupthink, and that people can act much more in a nefarious, even illegal, unethical, immoral way when they're in a group versus when they're acting individually.
Last question, just quickly. He seems easily flattered. Like when Putin praised him, he then went on a month tear of just praising Putin. Is that dangerous in a leader? We know that from his history, his father was somewhat distant. His mother, loved pageantry. It seems like he's trying to replace that that he needs that paternal sort of approval. Is that dangerous? Can that need for approval impair judgment? Should we be worried about that?
I mean, look, I think that someone who operates from a place of emotional deprivation, who experienced a lack of validation or love or connection in their early years and beyond, can demonstrate a tendency to put their own desires before that of others, their own sense of wanting to be validated. And I don't know if that's the case with him, but certainly anyone, Trump or anyone, that puts their own need to be sort of presented as important or presented as accepted or validated over the needs of a nation, that's disturbing.
Thank you. Dr. Hillary Goldsher-Irace, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your contribution. We hope to have you back. Have a lovely evening. Thank you for taking time away from your new family, and we love you.
Thank you for having me. Have a good night.
Bye, Doctor. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go back to... I apologize, folks. We are just shifting back into play. Oh, you gotta love technology. Oh, goodness, I just cannot find the proper button. If I could just be joined by the lovely Daniela Flanagan. I'm sorry that I can't give you the proper introduction that I wanted to do. Goodness. I apologize. I can't seem to get the PowerPoint.
That's an okay shot, though, right there.
Yeah.
I'll come in on that one.
Well, what I wanted to do kind of is just talk about some of the things that we've hit on the show tonight. Talking about the alt-right, talking about all the things that are happening. I wanted to get your point of view on this. I feel like frequently, I'm very confused. I feel like we've made so many advances in racial relations, and then the alt-right emerges, and I go, I've been crying at home about this. I'm so upset about it. What is your point of view on this? Do you feel like we've made progress, or did you feel like we've never made progress and this is just par for the course?
Yeah, I've been tossing that one. By the way, it was a great interview with her, too. I love that. So
Thank
that
you.
was really good. Good job. I have been tossing that around myself, too. It's been some, not sleepless nights, but with the long commute, I've had a chance to really think about, have we made progress? Have we not made progress? We obviously have civil rights, but have we really gained the human rights? I mean, do we have the respect as humanity, as human beings for one another? And have we really progressed as a nation where we truly are pluralistic and democratic, and everyone can come to the table and be able to have a say and be able to have what the Constitution says it gives us, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we're really not seeing that for a large segment of the population.
So you don't necessarily feel like we've made the advance. So I was a little bit delusional then and feeling like I had.
I'm really struggling with that because I just don't see it. I see where we've gained civil rights on paper, but that was forced. We saw what we had to do in order to get that to happen in the 20s for women to have, the right to vote, and then later in the 60s for the African American vote to be able to come to fruition. But now, like, really, where have we gone?
Let me shift to Kaepernick. Tony, this slide, honestly. Kaepernick, I want to talk about...
Stop letting him have access.
I know! Why do I let people like Tony have access to my computer?
You cannot trust that guy.
So,
Guido.
Kaepernick, what's going on with him? I feel like it's again, it's a false equivalency. He makes a silent protest, the nation goes crazy. Donald Trump spews horrible, hateful, vile things for 15 months.
Right.
Do you see that as false equivalent? Like,
yes.
When the GOP is like, oh, well, you've got that guy mouthing, like, do you see that also as, like I do, as a false equivalency?
Yeah. When you mentioned that earlier today, I was like, yeah, that's totally false equivalency. And then on top of that, he's not the first one to do this.
Right.
And not even in our lifetimes.
Right.
It's not the first instance of this.
Right.
We all sat there, and I watched the entire program for Muhammad Ali. He did the same thing. And again, he got vitriol back in the era of Vietnam. And you've got the Chris Jackson, who now changed his name. So is it Mahamud Abdul Rauf? He's with the Denver Nuggets. He changed his name. He did the exact same thing. We've got several other people who have made a stand. And with regard to the national anthem specifically, and saying like, I'm gonna make a stand. And then they went off on Simone Biles too. So, I mean, come on, there's so much change that needs to happen that we just really aren't adjusting.
So much has gone off in the Democratic Party and the GOP party. I'm sorry we don't have more time to break into. I wanted to talk about the polling numbers. Basically, Hillary, Donald, she's not that much further ahead.
Right.
Is that because she's a woman? Yeah. I can't understand. It is. Okay. Thank you. You heard it here. A woman identify. Yeah. It's so frustrating to me. Yeah. If a man would, I cannot. I feel like I just can't reconcile the fact that he is so vile and that she's only a couple points ahead.
Right.
It blows my mind.
But it's because she is a female.
Okay. I wanted to talk about how Donald Trump is a creation of the GOP. We're going to talk about it next week's episode. Yeah. Because if it's fast and if it's politics, it is fast politics. Thank you so much for the cast and crew, for Dr. Iris for joining us. Have a great night.